Hi, my name is Andy Hickman. I'm here with my business partner, Todd Kelly at Cumulus College Planning. We'd like to welcome all of you to today's webinar where we're going to be discussing the appeals process. I know there's a number of people still trying to access the webinar, so as they're trying to get on, I'll give you just a little bit of background on Todd and myself. Todd and I have been in the college planning arena for the better part of the last 12, 13, almost 14 years now, and as a result of that are somewhat known in the industry. We have been published in the Wall Street Journal, in Forbes magazine, and Todd is a regular contributor to College Confidential, which, if you're not familiar with it, you might want to be. It provides some excellent resources for college planning.
Now, Andy and I also have trained thousands and thousands of professionals across the country, financial professionals just like us, all over the country on how to do college planning. And we do that in an effort to help them reduce their out-of-pocket expense for their clients. Now, in the midst of us having our financial practice here in Cincinnati, we also do college planning, obviously, at area schools, churches, businesses, and community centers across not only the tri-state area, but also across the country as well. And if you believe your company would be interested in us giving a college planning presentation or a specific presentation like this appeals webinar that you're listening to, we're happy to do that. We do those free of charge for those companies and organizations. And we've even gotten a lot of requests recently to incorporate what we do as an employee benefit. So similar along the lines of a payroll deduction for the employees of particular companies. If that is something that might be of interest to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'd be happy to talk to you about those opportunities as well.
So today we're going to explore the appeals process. What I can tell you about the appeals process is that it is widely misunderstood. There's a lot of confusion about who may qualify, who definitely does not qualify. So we're going to clear the air there. Bottom line here is at the end of today's presentation, you should be well equipped to be either able to perform an appeal on your own, at least identify whether you would qualify for an appeal, and we're also going to give you the option of having the appeal done for you at absolutely zero risk. More on that as we get through the webinar. For now, let's go ahead and get started on the topic at hand.
I think it probably makes sense to first understand, how did you guys get to the point of even considering a financial aid appeal, and how did you get to this webinar? In the course of doing so, hopefully you followed a simple process to get here. I'm sure first you identified your college funding budget. Your son or daughter then has identified some career interests, which led you to a better understanding of what majors supported those particular pursuits as far as their career. And then you began evaluating a number of colleges that offered that field of study for your son or daughter. Now, also ideally, you probably have only entertained those schools where you thought you stood a reasonable chance of an out-of-pocket expense that is more in line with what your available resources are. Following that was probably a series of visits and evaluations that led you to filling out an application for admissions to, let's say, 5 or 7 schools that your son or daughter was interested in. And then as of this past October, which was obviously a change from years past, that's of the October of the student senior year is now when the FAFSA should be completed. And then once you've completed that FAFSA back in October, for the last several months, you've probably sat on pins and needles just waiting to receive those award letters from those 5 to 7 schools that you had identified as being interested in on your FAFSA form.
Now, if you didn't understand this initially, the FAFSA is a bit of a black box for most families. You put a mountain of information in, and out pops your EFC. Now, the EFC is expected family contribution. That is used to help determine what your award letter actually looks like. The actual calculation that the FAFSA uses in that black box looks something like this. Unfortunately, most people don't understand the nuances and all the lines and arrows of this particular diagram. Your odds, if you don't understand how the process works, of maximizing your financial aid outcome are somewhat diminished. For those of you thinking ahead or who may have a younger student, my best advice for you is that before you complete the FAFSA for the next student, let us know and we'll help you determine if your EFC can be optimized, which will in turn improve your financial aid award. So back to the FAFSA process. After your EFC was calculated, that result went to all of the schools you identified right inside your FAFSA form, and each of those schools was then responsible for sending you a financial aid award letter.
Now, award letters generally look something like this. So what you see on the screen, they're typically broken down, and you're going to see them broken down by semester or a term that the college follows, and it's going to hopefully identify the type of award. Now, it's starting to become a little more convoluted, where it's hard to tell whether it's a loan, a scholarship, or a grant. But a lot of them do a decent job of breaking this down. In a lot of cases, in most cases for the vast majority of you, you're going to see what's called a federal direct Stafford loan. Those are loans that are entirely in the student's name. You may also see what's called a PLUS loan. PLUS stands for Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. And then even a smaller few of you might even see a federal or state grant money that's offered. And grant money is what we call gift aid. That's free money. That's what you want a lot of, because that's money you never have to pay back. Now, some of you even more so, if you indicated on the FAFSA that you were interested in work study, could see an opportunity for your son or daughter to gain employment at the university. One of the things you should know, though, about work study is work study simply means that your son or daughter is on a list of being approved for one of the work study programs at the college. It's still going to be up to the student to figure out which jobs on campus are available and then subsequently apply to those particular jobs. And for work study, it's also important for you to understand that the student needs to do their homework before getting the offer, so you know exactly how to go about pursuing that particular employment once the student gets to campus.
So with respect to an appeal, the objective is simply to reduce the out-of-pocket expense by hopefully improving the award letter from the college. The great news for some of you is that you're probably going to qualify. Some of you, however, will not. So before you worry too much about qualifying for an appeal, let me introduce you to a couple of other ways to reduce your out-of-pocket expense for college. First, making sure that your student graduates in 4 years with a 4-year degree. Now, that sounds somewhat ridiculous. Doesn't everyone who goes after a degree in 4 years graduate in 4 years? And the answer, unfortunately, is no. Nationally, the statistics tell us that 39.8% of students who first set foot on campus their freshman year will actually graduate 4 years later. That means 60% don't do that. 60% are incurring an unnecessary extra semester or year. The next thing you can do to reduce the out-of-pocket expense is don't allow your student to remain undecided for too long. Now, the statistics on declaring a major are extraordinarily confusing. Some actually suggest that if your student declares a major too early, they'll stand a 70% chance of changing that major later on. And a change of major, just like a change of school, means an extra semester, perhaps an extra year, who knows? The point here being that school selection and major selection are key. Now, personally, I think the statistic should factor in how many students who declared their major did so with intent and a process. Most of the time, declaring a major is more about what the student feels good at, what academic subject did they excel at, or what input does mom and dad have, maybe some peer pressure, where are my friends going to school, and then I'll figure out the major, or even a limited understanding on the student's part of what all the options actually are. By the way, if your student is struggling with a major decision, we can definitely help with that. If that's an area of interest, just shoot us an email and we'll be happy to give you an overview of the process we use that we think will help dramatically with that decision. Another way you can reduce the out-of-pocket expense, I mentioned earlier, optimizing the EFC. Most parents have no idea what that means, but at a very high level, you'll pay more for college where you have assets in the wrong places. Sometimes just moving an asset from one place to another, reclassifying it, can dramatically improve the EFC and reduce the amount you'll pay for college. Again, that's an area of expertise. If you're interested, please ask. Another way to reduce the out-of-pocket expense, Standardized test scores. You probably already know this. Many schools use a matrix to determine how much financial aid a student will get in the form of merit-based awards, and that's based on their standardized test scores. Sometimes an extra point or two on the ACT or a step up on the SAT can make a dramatic difference in the amount of money you'll be awarded. And finally, scholarships. Scholarships are an area that is fascinating. How many students continue to pursue scholarships through the entire time they're in college? Here's what happens. Most students become aware of scholarships sometime in their senior year. They apply to a few, and once they're accepted at a college, they stop. Here's a little secret. The students who get the most in scholarship money tend to continue pursuing those scholarships from anywhere in their high school all the way through their last day of college.
So let's talk about the last one, and that is the reason you're on this particular call, and that is the appeal process. So right off the bat, I think first and foremost, one of the things that we want to make you aware of is the fact that of what an appeal, I guess, is not. And an appeal is not a negotiation. We strongly encourage our clients never to use the word negotiation when going through the process of the appeal. You're not going to be successful to get your award reconsidered if you're playing the authority card. And when you come from a negotiation point of view, you're playing the authority card that you're requesting or demanding, so to speak, that they negotiate with you versus you actually appealing to their professional judgment. Your best suited, your best ability to get this done is to be humble, to absolutely know your facts, and be prepared with a very clear understanding of what you can pay for college and what you're specifically asking the college for. So with regard to that, there's some supporting documentation that is going to be required when you file an appeal. The document that you see now on the screen is what we give our clients to help them identify if a particular circumstance that they've been involved in, it will warrant them filing an appeal. So you see these there on the screen. A reduction of income. It could be a loss of job. It could be some extenuating circumstance with a business that had a really bad year, and that particular year is not indicative of what's happened in the past. So some type of reduction of income. High medical expenses. A lot of times those are not asked on the FAFSA. There's nowhere to indicate that medical expenses are high, so that would warrant certainly filing an appeal. Misrepresentation of assets. As Andy mentioned earlier, when you have assets that are misplaced on the FAFSA, it can severely and very impactfully reduce the amount of financial aid award that you potentially might receive, or the amount of money you might receive, and consequently increase substantially your out-of-pocket expenses. If you have younger kids in the family that you're paying grade school tuition for, or additional siblings that are in private high schools where you're paying tuition, that is something else that could warrant an appeal. Any kind of death or illness in the family that caused some changes to your finances or impacted your cash flow certainly warrants the filing of appeal. Special circumstances, as we call them, within your family. Those could revolve around, again, a death, divorce, separation of mom and dad, those type of things, or even a parent being incarcerated or institutionalized, which we're hearing, I won't say frequently, but we do hear from time to time. What if your income is significantly different from the year before? And I guess an example of that might be, what if during the year you lost your job, you received a fairly significant severance package based on the amount of time you've been employed at that particular company, and then you start a new job. Your income could be exactly the same between both jobs as far as your base salary, but because of that severance package, your income for that year is going to be substantially different than what it's been in the past. That would be something else that would warrant potentially filing an appeal. Some type of single event that happened within the year. It could be a home sale. Maybe you did a Roth conversion. Maybe your income was lower this year and you decided to do a Roth conversion to take advantage of the increased tax benefit. If there's student or parental support or that comes into play, or Social Security income because of a death, and all that has stopped or since stopped since the student has turned 18. There's so many factors that come into play when you're talking about Social Security income and those type of things those are also reasons that warrant filing an appeal. The family, for instance, you see there might have an inability to manage current expenses. This would not be due to excessive debt or lifestyle. The FAFSA really doesn't care about your debt. There's no question on the FAFSA they ask about debt. So it wouldn't be due to excessive debt or lifestyle. And the last one you see there on the list talks about the fact that you got an award letter from a similar school. Now, when we're talking about similar schools, this would be what we would term a merit award. And in a lot of cases, you can use one school against the other as it relates to merit awards. So I should tell you, now that I've mentioned that there are two very distinct types of appeals for undergraduate students. And before I get to those, I first want to say that there are actually two additional appeals in addition to the undergraduate student appeals. These would be for existing college students. So the first one would be where the student gets a reduced award in subsequent years. So they come in as a freshman, and in years 2, 3, and 4, their award is substantially less. That is a time, once the student's already in school, that they could potentially file an appeal. A second one would be if the student who's already in college receives an award and it's been reduced because of their academic performance or some academic reason. That would be another reason for appeals. Now, again, these types of appeals are for students that are already in college. So we just want to make you aware of that, because the appeal process doesn't necessarily stop when the student enters school. There are numerous times where an appeal might make sense after the student's in school. But as you know, this webinar today specifically focuses around appeals for first-time college students. And so back to what I was originally going to point out, there are two very distinct types of appeals. The first one is the merit-based appeal, which is generally going to involve the admissions department. And then there's the need-based appeal, which is usually addressed by the financial aid office and the financial aid officer within that office. Regardless, what I would tell you is, regardless of the type of appeal that you're considering, there's a few things and a few ducks that you want to have in a row when you begin this process.
So let's talk about the merit-based appeals first. Those are generally the simpler types of appeals in terms of the supporting documentation that's necessary. An example would be that your student received a $20,000 annual scholarship from school A, but they really want to go to school B. Explaining that situation and providing a copy of the original award letter from school A to school B might be enough. However, it is not advisable to have much hope of an improved award if schools A and B are not competitors for the same type of student, if they have very dissimilar admissions standards or are supported by a completely different financial structure. For example, you don't have much of a chance of convincing a public school of matching a private school's award. Comparing an open enrollment school with a highly competitive school, again, unlikely to bear fruit.
Now, before any appeal, your first step is to do some investigation or homework. And that means going out and doing your due diligence at the school, much like you would a job interview, to prepare for it. You want to know as much as you possibly can about the process that the school goes through for how they go through the process of the appeals. That could be going to their website and determining who is the person that you need to contact who will most likely handle your appeal. The next thing you're going to want to do is identify if the school specifically has a process. Is there a process you need to follow? The one thing we do know about filing an appeal is you need to be very diligent about following the school's process. So if there's a step-by-step process, you want to make sure you follow that process. And then with virtually any appeal, the student should be the one leading the charge. This should not be directed by mom or dad. It should be the student that is generally doing most of the pushing, so to speak. But generally speaking, the college has a legal obligation to limit their conversations with the student, who in most cases is legally an adult. Parents should take a backup role, as I stated. It should be the student that's leading. And to the extent that the financials are the domain of the parent, the school official will generally understand and accept input from the parent, but the conversation and the process should be perceived by the college as being managed by the student. And every appeal should be made only with the supporting documentation, as we've mentioned earlier. Find out what that is on the school's website, find out what they expect and need, and then gather that and have it ready. You should also understand what supporting documentation is required for the particular type of appeal that you're filing. Going back to our worksheet, we've identified the most commonly accepted forms of supporting documentation for each type of appeal to make this easier for you.
Also, as Todd mentioned earlier, you cannot use the term negotiation. We are not in a process of negotiation. You can certainly think of it that way, but please do not utter the term negotiation. We are going to refer to it as an appeal, but we're also not going to use that term. The term that you should use, and the one that the college will be familiar with, is, you can write this down, professional judgment. Also, you are asking for help, not necessarily money. Leave it to them to offer money. In real words, your son or daughter might say something like this to the financial aid officer. Hi, this is Andy Hickman. I received a very generous financial aid award from your school recently, but I have a situation I would like to discuss with you. I obviously have a goal of a college education, but I have a circumstance that I need some help with, and I'm hopeful that you might be able to offer some professional judgment in terms of altering the award based on those circumstances. I've researched your website and believe I have the documentation that you'll need. I'd like to schedule an appointment with you so we can discuss the situation.
Okay, so you've requested the appointment. Now, one of the things that or some of the suggestions we're going to have for you is for you to be contrite, polite, when you're asking for help while sounding potentially deserving of that help. Pretty much it's that simple, but we want to make sure that we cover all the bases. First, whatever appeal you make, again, either the merit-based or award-based, should be done with a sense of urgency soon after the initial award letter was received. Next, we advise that the appeal be made both by mail or electronically, as well as in person. There is lots of value that comes from meeting with them in person. Also, if the student is particularly well qualified academically for admission, it's never a bad idea to discuss the circumstance for the appeal with the department chair of the major the student is intending on pursuing. Now, I will tell you that starts with the visit, not to get off track here, but when a student goes on a visit, it's extremely important that they sit down with the department chair, create a rapport and somewhat of a relationship. If the department chair likes that student, when they reach out to them for admissions or reaches out to them for financial aid or in the form of appeal, that department chair stands a good chance, if the student stayed in contact, of remembering that student and going to bat for them. So that again emphasizes the importance of meeting with them one-on-one, because the chair can be an advocate for your student's particular situation, both with the financial aid and the admissions department, to help your students secure an improved award. This takes demonstrated interest to a whole new level. One other thing to keep in mind is the process of seeking additional help should also include a request for information or guidance in pursuing second chance merit awards. Now, some of you may be asking, what in the world is a second chance merit award? So often a school has made preliminary financial aid awards to students who, for whatever reason, as we know, teenagers change their mind quite a bit, but for whatever reason, they don't wind up taking the admissions offer. They don't wind up accepting the offer to attend the school. Their merit award then is unused and can be offered to another student, effectively providing your student an opportunity at a second chance award.
So to kind of summarize the appeal process, the secret sauce, the secret formula, really comes down to this. Are you ready? It's about first telling a story. You want to make sure that whatever your story is, the reason or the circumstance that you believe is your cause for filing an appeal, elaborate on the story. Let the FAO or the admissions office know what the circumstances are. You want to make sure that you've adequately illustrated for them the negative impact that it's had on your family financially. The next thing you want to make sure that you've communicated is the steps that you've taken to try to lighten the burden of that circumstance. If you're not going to go to bat for yourself, you can't hardly expect the school to help in addition. So you want to make sure that you communicate what you have done to lessen the impact of this particular circumstance. And then finally, you have to make sure that you let them know specifically what you're after. And the more precise you can make it in terms of the actual dollar amount that would make this dream come true, that's what you want to make sure that you've made clear. Now, regardless of how good your appeal letter and your appeal conversation might be, there are still going to be 4 reasons why your appeal letter, the appeal process, might not yield any improvement whatsoever. Those 4 reasons are pretty simple. The student, quite honestly, is not competitive academically, and that's really talking to the merit-based appeal. Another reason might be that your EFC is just way too high. Regardless of the situation, if the school believes you have the resources to make this work, they're not going to improve their award. The last 2 are kind of painful, but if a school just isn't a school with a rich history of responding to need and even less so appeals, regardless of what you do, chances are pretty good that the school just doesn't have the money. And we file that, and kind of the 4th reason here and the 2nd are a bit of the same. There's just some schools that are lousy at giving financial awards. There's a handful of schools nationally that do a great job, but if the school that you're pursuing isn't one of those schools, then the appeal result probably isn't going to be as good as it might have been had it been a school that had a rich history of what we call doing the right thing. Now, let's talk about the odds of success of any given appeal and what you might expect as a result of your appeal. As you probably suspect, there are 2 ways of going about an appeal. There's the do-it-yourself or with the help of a professional. Now, I'm here to tell you that anyone can achieve a successful outcome by taking on the process on their own. I will also tell you that it's a process with potentially a lot at stake, and one where second chances, by and large, don't exist. You have to get it right the first time. Now, if you're insistent on going it alone, I'm very hopeful that we've pointed you in the right direction today and at least given you a solid foundation on which to build in order to attempt an appeal on your own. However, I also want to give you an opportunity and assurance of getting it done right, the right way, and the first time. Todd and I have developed a relationship with a gentleman considered to be the most experienced expert on the appeals process in the nation. His name is Stuart Siegel. We'd like to invite you to have Stuart be your appeals pro with absolutely no risk. We're going to invite you to use Stuart for any single appeal for $279, but with a guarantee that if your award is not improved by at least that amount, you can request a full refund. Our objective is to save you money. If we can't do that, I don't want you to pay anything. If you were going to go to Stuart directly, his charge for appeals is between $125 and $250 per half of an hour. That's how good he is. At this point, however, he only takes referrals. He only does appeals for referrals from past clients. We're the exception. Stuart has agreed to take on any of our clients for any appeal for a flat rate of $279. Now, we're backing up his work with the refund. If he can't help you, his average-based merit improvement is $4,000. We think he can help you if you have a case. When it comes to a need-based case, your award is probably going to be even higher than that. So merit-based typical improvement is $4,000, and that's per year. The merit, $4,000. The need-based, even higher, but it depends on the situation.
So Andy, let's make it easy as possible for them with regard to understanding this refund. In order to request a refund, all we're going to ask for is a copy of the before and after award letter that you received. And we want that inside of 60 days, demonstrating that the improvement that you received on that revised award letter that you got back from the school fell short of your purchase price of $279. So the steps are pretty simple. First, just make sure you have an appeal case. We went through some of those pre-qualifiers earlier, but make sure first that you do have a case for appeal, and do that to the best of your ability. Review our Am I Qualified document, which also is going to spell out the refund policy that Andy and I just discussed. And then we want you to click on the link on this page, which is going to allow you to purchase the $279 appeals process from Stuart. the first thing that's going to happen after you confirm your purchase is that you're going to receive a fillable PDF that you should immediately complete and return to the address given on the PDF document you're going to receive. You're also going to be asked to provide copies of the required supporting documentation, which, as we've stated throughout this webinar, is extremely important. After that, you're going to be contacted by Stuart with the next steps in the process. Very shortly after that, you'll be prepared for your appeal letter as well as your appeal meeting with the college. And with regard to that, by the way, we're going to keep the link for the $279 offer, Andy. I think we talked about keep the offer open during the webinar for webinar attendees only. We do not offer this on any website. We're going to send you the link, but it's only valid through April. But if you believe you qualify, we're going to try and make it easy for you as possible to take advantage. Also, if you are likely invited to this webinar from one of our presentation partners, not only do you have our word that we're going to do the best we can for you, we don't want to risk your satisfaction, but we also don't want to risk the great relationships we have with either your school, your community center, or other organizations from whom you may have received this invitation. You should also know that the $279 discount $279 is a discount, a reduction in price from our nationally offered price for this service of $375. So with that, I'd like to open up for questions. There's an option on your screen to ask questions, so if there's anything you'd like to ask at this point, Andy and I would be happy to respond. And so with that, Andy, let's just take a few questions.
That sounds good. And by the way, if you do have questions, you don't feel like asking them in this forum, our contact information is there on the screen. You're welcome to send us an email. Also, if you have questions on your particular situation, if you think it may, but you're not sure if it will qualify as a legitimate appeals request, just give us a shout, send us an email. We'll evaluate it. We'll even call you on the phone and discuss it if you like. We're as available as we can be in this process. We want to make sure that you're comfortable with it, and we give you every opportunity to improve the award that was made to you or reduce your out-of-pocket expense, however we might be able to direct you. So, any questions?